You know, Tyson versus Tua, fantasy matchup. That's like, that's similar to Rocky Marciano and Mike Tyson. I would give it to Mike Tyson over Rocky Marciano any day of the week. Why? Because Rocky Marciano can be hurt. He did get hurt, and he got hurt by smaller guys. He got hurt by Jersey Joe Walcott. He got knocked down by the old mongoose. So I don't think he would take he could take Mike Tyson's power. And Mike Tyson said it himself that athletes ultimately get better with different uh, exercise regimens, and just the study of training and exercising. You get better in time, so the human gets better in time. So him fighting a guy like that would be that would be easy. But Tua fighting a guy like Tua wouldn't be as easy as you think. And you think Mike Tyson, oh man, you would think quickly, just instinctively, like, oh man, Tua would get destroyed by Tyson. But you're like, okay, well, you got to ask yourself, which Tua are we talking about? Are we talking about the Tua from the 90s? Like 97, 98? Are we talking about that Tua? Or are we talking about the Tua from the 2000s? Okay, 'cause there is a big difference between those two. Okay. You had David Tua, 225 pounds, 223 to 25 pounds, lean, ball headed, right? Left hook, lunging, left hook, knockout and knocking guys out, catching them with that one punch power, dangerous from rounds 1 to 12. You know what I mean? And he was a worker bee, meaning he liked to work the body. He loved that throw, that left uppercut. He took those chances because he knew he had that chin. He had that beard, right? So you have that guy that threw over 600 punches against Ike Kabarabuchi. They broke a record in heavyweight fights of a 12-round fight. Over 1,200 punches. Fought an undefeated guy, a sleeping giant like Ike Kabarabuchi that nobody ever heard of. The president, they called him. Guy was 20-0, 15 KOs. Nobody ever heard of this guy. But David Tua was thrown in there with him. And Mike Tyson said himself about David Tua, what are you going to do? I quote. He says, what are you going to do when you're getting your ass whooped? David Tua showed you. Because David Tua was getting his ass whooped, but he knew how to whoop ass too. It was a good fight, man. It was a great fight, and it showed David Tua had heart in the 90s. That's the Tua in the 90s. The Tua in the 2000s, 30 pounds heavier, had a bird's nest, looked like he had the kid, and from the Kid and Play Hot Top Fade. You know what I mean? He gets to fight and his hair's soft, right? So it's coming down in front of his face. He's slower. He's not as effective. He doesn't throw those punches no more because he's only looking at his power and his beard. That's his attributes. Easy to hit, easier to hit. That Tua. But you got to be fair about it, guys. Look at it this way. You say, oh, well, the Tyson from the 80s versus the Tyson from the 2000s. Well, that's a no-brainer. The Tyson from the 80s. But, Tua always has power. But Tua he was not the same fighter he was in the 90s than he was in the 2000s, so it's kind of hard to say. Let's look at it like that. And then you got to look at the Tyson from the 2000s. So if we're going to match him up, we're going to match him up chronologically. Okay, we're going to do it fair. If you're going to look at that 255-pound Tua, you got to look at that older Mike Tyson after the Lewis fight, because all this is post-Lewis. Tua fought Lewis in 2000, right? End of 2000. And he lost terribly, miserably, from a taller, quicker, more skilled guy that knew all he has is a left hand. And then after the fight was over, he didn't even give him credit for even hitting him with the left hand. He was like, that ain't a left hand. That's what Lennox Lewis said. So, Tua was really not as effective, but he still always had that one-punch knockout power. So yeah, it depends on when these guys fought. If they both fought in the 90s, that would probably be the best fight that you could ask for. The 90s brawl. Because both those guys dipped and ripped. That's what they did. working the body. Tyson was always a little quicker, I feel. He was just more, he was just more, hey, he could just come off the pivot foot. He made the right uppercut, stepping out popular. That's what he hit Frank Bruno with. And the thing is, he's that kind of guy that can hit you and then dip under your shots. So he can punch and elude. David Tua didn't have that ability. David Tua did bob and weave. He did give you that that Mike Tyson impersonation. Like, that was, okay, well, he's similar to him, but he was not exactly like him. The left hooks were even thrown similar. I think Tua kind of launched his, where Tyson had more of a hook behind his, but they were all power. POW, dynamite. If he hit you with any of those guys, hit you with any of those punches, you're through. Done. So, no, I would love to see a fight like that. And you always question why these guys never fought. Because Tua stayed a number one contender for the longest time, and you had all these sanctioning bodies. So, you had a lot of heavyweights in the heavyweight division in the 90s. It didn't go dark until the 2000s. Let's face it. The Klitschko's had it. Everything went dark in the heavyweight division because, none of them were American, unfortunately. And that's where it stayed for the longest until, recently. But, in the 90s, you had dozens of heavyweights. You had guys that were still fighting that were very good in the early or to mid 90s. They were still fighting and still holding on to that idea of winning a championship. So they were still in the leagues and they were still fighting. So you had a lot of guys. So it was easy for those guys not to fight each other, but from just skill and grit, I had to give it to Tyson, but I don't feel that Tyson could handle Tua's punch. I don't think that he could, just because of how he was handled by Holyfield, because those punches were from Holyfield was hurting Tyson. But the problem is these guys have no common opponent besides Lennox Lewis, and they actually happen the same way. But if you look at those two fights, right? You look at Tua, and Tua was that fat Tua then, that 255 Tua with the bird's nest. The high top fade, kid and play, high top fade. That Tua. The guy that didn't really throw. He threw 10 punches around. That guy. And he took punches after punches. Okay? Maybe because you could say, well, he went into survival mode or whatever with Lewis. You could say that. I can understand that argument. But he did take those punches from Lennox Lewis. Whereas Mike Tyson went in to fight. Okay? David Tua went in to fight at certain spots. Okay, and it was actually it was a lackluster fight. It was Lennox Lewis keeping him behind his jab. If he did get out of line, and if Tua did throw the left, he would make him pay with rights, and lefts. Whereas he took out Tyson, but he couldn't take out Tua. It was long 12-round fight decision win for Lennox Lewis when he fought Tua. Whereas Tyson, he was out in 8, I believe, done. But, Tyson stopped really fighting too. He was discouraged, but Tyson has never been a survivor fighter. He's always the way, hey, you're going to whoop my ass, I'm going to whoop yours. That's how it's going to go. Tua, I think that he gained all that weight by default. He didn't have that work rate. He didn't have that stamina to throw those punches round after round. So, by default, he became a surviving fighter, I feel, in the Lewis fight. You know what I mean? But he did still take those punches. So the point I'm making is David Tua was still able to take Lennox Lewis's punches because Lennox Lewis, again, was the only guy that they both fought, right? So that's who we go on with that. And I feel David Tua has the better chin for punches, So I would like to see it, in any era. Just not now. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to see those guys now. That wouldn't be cool. David Tua, I don't know how he's doing. I hope he's fine. He's always been one of my favorites. The throwing Samoan, the Tua man, the Tua-manator. You know what I mean? Kid Dynamite, Mike Tyson, those will always be classic guys. But but I think Tyson could just outwork him if he couldn't knock him out. But I think Tua can knock out anybody. And I believe that. I think that Tua, if he connects perfectly like he did with John Ruiz, Michael Moore, David Izon, even though that was the 11th round, Oleg Baskayev, countless others, he could knock even Tyson out. But that's my prediction on it, man. That's my fantasy matchup. I know this is like part 2 of this, and I know these are lengthy, but I get excited talking about boxing. So if you guys, drive like I do, you want to hear some good commentation or a good discussion about 2 classic fighters, okay? And indeed, these are 2 classic fighters in the heavyweight division. That's why I wanted to share it with you guys. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been counterpunched. Peace.